morning to one and all present here. I, Adiba Mukadam,
I, Amay Verma,
welcome you to the International Conference 2020, which is on EduFuture for Sustainable World Economic Order, Research, Innovation and Technology. What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create. Rightly said by Buddha. In this era of digitization, we see innovation and technology helping humans reach higher pinnacle of success. And today's conference would definitely aggravate the future of education through technology, research, and innovation. Before we start our event, let us all rise and pay a tribute to Goddess Saraswati by lighting a lamp and prayer. I request Dr. Nitin Joshi sir, Dr. Guru Prasad Murthy sir, Dr. Smita Jape ma'am, and all the dignitaries to do the honors.
धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रभुदिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मा पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा कुन्देतु तुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रभुदिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मा पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा.
Thank you all the dignitaries and my student friend for the wonderful Saraswati Vandana. I request all the dignitaries to take a seat on the dais. I would like to introduce Dr. Nitin Joshi sir. Dr. Nitin Joshi is the director at Dr. V.N. Brems. Dr. Joshi has over 20 plus years of rich and varied experience in various fields like marketing and operation. He is a certified assessor for business excellence from EFQM and RBNQA. Dr. Joshi has been offering consulting service in the areas of business process improvement. Dr. Joshi has to its credit several publications, articles, research papers, and a book, Service Operation Management Towards Excellence. Sir, I invite you for the welcome address.
Good morning, one and all, and a very warm welcome to our guests, to faculty colleagues, and dear friends. I think it is an honor to be here, and I'm extremely happy that this is the 5th year where I'm addressing a conference. And believe me, every conference gives me a new learning. And one of the learnings is when I see the chairs today, I see there is a serious need to change our pedagogy. In terms of student attendance and everything, I personally feel that the time has come where we need to bring in the change so that we deliver something which is probably more meaningful to them and probably which will help us create a sustainable country. So with this thought, because the changing behavior, the changing learning behavior of the student, the changing lifestyles, and the changing thought process need to be captured by we means teachers and faculty colleagues. And I think we always say that there is a need to change that side. Now I feel that there is a need to change this side. With this note, I feel this conference is anyway going to be something which is going to tell us about an uncertain future where we are not very sure what we are going to create, what kind of skills we are going to create for jobs which we don't know. We may not be knowing the exact skill set required, though we know that some of the parameters could be still in terms of critical thinking, creativity, problem solving. But I think though the skills are coined in a new way, I personally feel that problem solving was always there. Probably our approach could have been different because problems at that time were different. And I see that as an important skill which will continue, and I don't see any big difference there. Second important skill, which is creativity, I think even that skill is there, was there. It started off right from the kitchen, where we could have so many recipes, and I think India is highest in number of recipes. So a lot of creativity is there. So I don't see any lag when we talk about creativity. Creativity from the student's perspective, yeah, I think there is a need to cultivate the culture of creativity because I think with the information bombardment happening with the student, they are unable to assimilate the information in the right format and unable to demonstrate that creativity which is expected by the business and which will help them earn something out of it. So today, which is called as innovation. So that is what is the expectation of the industry, that they are looking for graduates or postgraduates who have enough of talent in terms of understanding of technology, in terms of understanding of data analysis, which is what we call as critical thinking. And we also talk about innovation. Why innovation? Too much of innovation? Because I was just discussing some of the things with our faculty colleagues, and I was asking them a very simple question. The question was, what is a very big change which we have seen in the last 10 years, say from 2010 to 2020? What is that big change we have seen? Any thoughts? So everybody talked that changes have been in terms of technology. So probably we still used Kalapili taxis, and now we use Uber. So app has come into place where mode of business or business model to some extent has changed. Some of the other things where I could see was a band instead of a watch. A lot of people wearing a Fitbit band or an Honor band or a MI band because some amount of health consciousness has gone into. So that one change. Early morning when I go for a walk, I see a lot of people running around because I think this craze of marathon, and so these are some of the changes which I have seen. Some of the changes have also been in the business models. In terms of business models, earlier we used to talk about something called capital intensive models or cost reduction models. I think now most of the models are focusing on asset light models. So these were some of the observations and some of the discussions when I was interacting with the faculties. And therefore our thought is, what is that which we will have to change, which we will have to bring in as a change in terms of pedagogy, in terms of technology, or in terms of understanding our own students, so that we help them nurture into a more meaningful business professional, because that is what BRIMS aims at, and ultimately a lifelong learner who is going to contribute for the society and also going to contribute for the country. So I have a very small presentation here. I'm sure some of the things I would have already shared what I'm going to talk about. Or would you like to be there so that you, I wish to take care of your health. Yeah? Yeah. तकलीफ जर्नल का भी काम होता है ना. So the question is need for new solutions in a rapidly changing world. So what is that solution which we are talking about in the conference, and what do we expect? So I'm sure there are eminent experts from the industry, from the academia, and from the corporate, and I'm sure they are going to bring in a lot of thought processes. So when we talk about change, I think of three important challenges which are there in front of us, and how do we address this? So first is the environmental challenge, and we are all aware that we are talking about CO2 evolution, and we are talking about green cars, we are talking about electric vehicles, we are talking about a lot of material which is getting scarce. So all that. So environmental is going to be a big issue. So water crisis, so many crises. So that is one. Second important challenge which I see is the economic challenge. When I talk about the economic challenge, the thought is the scientific knowledge is creating new opportunities. The scientific knowledge is creating new opportunities and solutions that can enrich our lives, which at the same time fueling disruptive waves of change in every sector. So earlier we were seeing these kind of changes only in R&Ds earlier, and we used to think of BARC, DRDO. These kind of institutions were responsible for bringing in a lot of scientific changes. We also heard about NASA doing something. So all that area where our direct interaction was not there. But now science and technology, I would say, has got into life of everybody. And what I remember from the vision and mission statement of Microsoft, that a PC in every house. So when those kind of dreams shifted, so I think even that is now a very old vision, I would say, and now a palm or a device in every palm is what some of the mobile companies have vision, and they already have achieved that kind of thing. So that is there, and because of this, there are a lot of disruptions happening. Now when I say disruptions, believe me, business models are changing. When I'm saying changing, and probably we are also saying that changes are happening very fast, don't go by the word very fast. I would only say changes are happening. Because I did some study, and I could see that actually real changes happened between 1860s to 1910. And those changes were very fast in terms of power, in terms of steam engine, in terms of industrialization, in terms of electricity coming in, and they were changing or disrupting the lives of millions and millions of people. So probably, and the speed of change at that time was faster than the current change, which is only a technological change. So that was influencing a life in a very different way. Means people were using kerosene, and after the electricity came in, there was a light in every house. I think that was a big difference and big change. We can debate on it, but this is my thought process. And so second important is the financial interdependence at local, national and regional level has created global value chains. Now one thing is for sure that with technology, with movements of people across the globe, we are in a global village. So we need to be ready as students that or as learners, we need to be ready to face this global village competition, face this diversity, face this cultural change, and we'll have to accept this rather than just facing it. We'll have to accept, and we have to be agile enough to adapt this change. The third challenge is the social challenge. As the global population continues to grow, migration, urbanization, and increasing social and cultural diversity, which I was talking about, is already there. So don't ignore this. I will see what will happen. You will have to anyway see. But if you are already ready, if you preempt it, probably your, no, your ability to handle things will be much better. From the source which is there, Sustainability Science, it says that it is impossible to think about educational matters without making references to the future. Because whatever we are learning today, I am sure you are going to use it tomorrow. It is not immediate consumption. So when we talk about this future, so education thought process and our understanding of future determines, for example, what knowledge and which skills are considered to be important for the next generation. So what kind of knowledge is going to be important for you, and what is the skill set which is going to be used is going to be extremely, extremely important. But there is always an uncertainty. And what is that? So when we talk about the future, we can see two things. One is future which is certain and future which is uncertain. If it is certain, which is this way, if it is certain, then it is not so difficult, because humans have the ability to evolve anyway. So you will survive and sustain. But, however, if the future is presumed to be uncertain, and if the intensity of this uncertainty is high, which is ultimately the case, then necessary knowledge and skills are not that easy to determine. So we as even faculty members, we will be finding it extremely difficult to find what exactly will be required by you in the coming future. So need for us and everybody is what knowledge, skills, attitude and values will today's student need to thrive and shape their world, and how can instructional system or systems develop these knowledge, skills, attitude, values effectively. So is there a need to bring in some changes in our instruction thought processes? Technology driven, Google Classroom, out of the classroom, beyond the boundaries of the classroom, beneath the tree, where? Or some mechanism of instruction which is digitally driven or something. So that we need to really identify. Another study which was done by UNESCO have identified few gaps, and some of the, it identifies 5 priority action areas for these gaps. So what are these? They are saying that mainstreaming education for sustainable development. So UNESCO is emphasizing on sustainable development, and they are thinking that mainstreaming education as sustainable development is going to be one of the priorities. Second is transforming learning and training institutions, like us by integrating sustainable development principles in daily activities. So sustainability in daily activities, not one day Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, not one day this Abhiyan, but it has to be a sustainable every day kind of thought process. Other things are building capacities in educators and trainers. So one thing is very clear, that this conference is not only for students, but is also for faculty members. And all the conferences are always for faculty members, but this one is little more, because there is a need for change. And I don't know what is that change, but there is a need for change. Empowering and mobilizing youth, which I think to some extent we are doing, and accelerating the implementation of sustainable solutions at local and community levels. So it is very important that we don't blame governments, we don't blame TMC. Let us start doing small things at community level, at institutional level, at our own VPM level. And that is the need. Some of the skills as per the system. So one skill which I really liked most is this one. So please check whether you have mental elasticity and complex problem solving ability. Now you may have problem solving ability, but this mental elasticity is extremely important. So mental elasticity is something which you will have to develop. This is going to be part of your cognitive flexibility, I would say, where rigidity of thoughts will have no place, because you can be rigid, but if the scenarios are not allowing you to be so rigid, then it will going to be a big challenge. Other things which we have already talked about is critical thinking, creativity. People skill, we are still talking about, but my other slide will tell you that people skill may go down. And interdisciplinary knowledge. So I think that is going to be important, because complexity is increasing. So it is not engineering alone, management alone, science alone, arts alone. And we are all aware that our new education policy is also talking about all this. And they are saying that there may not be a separate science college, arts college, and they may club everything together. So one slide which I worked upon, and I thought it could be of some interest to all of you. So I was checking about what was there in 2015 and what is there in 2020, where we are currently in. So in is complex problem solving was there as #1 skill. In 2020 also it is #1. And I think it is going to be there till we exist. Because complexity is going to increase, and everything is going to increase. So complexity of problem solving is always going to be, this is today's feeling of mine. Next is coordination with others. This was important in 15, but it has gone down to 5th position when we talk about 2020. Because many things are now getting onto technology platform, and technology is asking you to do everything by yourself. Register at Amazon, register at this site, register at that site. So if you are registered, technology is taking care of that coordination to a large extent. And where technology is not taking care of that, there people will be required, and therefore it was 2nd and now it is 5th. Another important skill, people management, which I was talking about, was at number 3, and now it has shifted to number 4th position. So because technology is going to manage a lot of things, and as we all know that countries like Singapore are managed more by cameras rather than people. So, or like we have seen that in Dubai, when we get into the airport, we don't need to do anything. Everything will be managed by technology itself. So those kind of things are coming into place, and I'm sure people management skill, which was once upon a time as one of the most important skills, probably is shifting. Critical thinking, which was number 4, is moving up the ladder, and I wish that you all focus on this skill, and we should encourage, develop the skills by use of case studies, problem solvings, etc. Negotiation skills, our professor friend Mr. Arlop is here. He would be very happy to see that this is going down. Because he always says that, sir, मैं तो परचेज में था, तो negotiation तो मेरे blood में है, तो अभी आपको blood से निकाल देना पड़ेगा. Because in Amazon, when you go to buy something on Amazon or on a lot of B2B sites, there is hardly negotiation. So it's always on bid and very transparent kind of pattern. One negotiation is fine. Quality control, I think this is which I was talking to Professor Jappe, and she says, oh, we were talking about quality so much. Every time we were talking about quality so much. And in 2020, this quality control is not there at all. Logic is, it's not saying that we don't need quality control, but it is expected that quality will be there. So there is no need to quality control. So processes will take care of the quality, and probably you don't need to get into quality control as a skill set. Another area, service orientation, judgment and decision making is moving up. Active listening is again shifting, because this kind of communication is reducing. Probably more of technology driven reading and technology driven listening. I would say active, instead of active listening, people will have to become active learners and continuous learners. So that is one thing which and creativity, which was here on the 10th position, has shifted to the 3rd position. So I think these are some of the changes which are there, and students need to be ready for that. and faculty members also need to be ready for that, because we will have to make students ready for the future. So as per numerous articles on this subject, traditional disciplines are not enough, and technology-driven global business ecosystem of the future calls for something called, this is for 2030, as per the research by Forbes.com. These are the skills which will be there. So these are very similar to something which we are talking about in 2020, but some of the skills which are there, like if you see people management, people skills, vagara, is not so much there, it's not there. So things are changing, and critical thinking, which was there on the third position, has become number one position in 2030. So no, a lot of changes are, now these are all research driven things. So we hope that these researches are true without assumptions, and things will be there. So are we getting geared up to empower our students for the jobs that don't exist? Because we don't know. I have already told you during our induction program itself that we don't know what is going to happen after 20 years from now. So don't think that we are making you ready for tomorrow or for 2021 placements, but think that what is going to happen in 2041, where you will have to be still leading the businesses. And an in-depth study from the World Economic Forum, supported by data from LinkedIn, reveals the jobs of tomorrow, or emerging jobs that are in urgent demand. So some of the jobs, as per this research, says that 37% are going to be in care economy. 30% of the jobs are going to be in the care economy. People are in stress. I assume that there is a lot of stress. People need entertainment, hospitality, tourism, all that. So care economy looks to be decent. This is over the next 3 years. 17% sales, marketing, and content. So please, I think yesterday we were talking about that who has created this banner or this poster, and I was saying that if innovation is the only way to win, then how people without innovation will survive? So no, we were saying that we will ask you this question, and we are going to ask you this question. Next is 16% data and AI. So though it is here data and AI, but I think be aware that it is not that only data is going to work. There are a lot of other things which are there. So you have all the opportunities, people who are scared of data and all that. So don't be worried about it. Engineering and cloud computing 12% and 8% people and culture. And therefore in our last conference on 25th Jan, Joshi Bedekar, and they were all saying that in IITs, literature is getting introduced. All that only for this kind of area and bringing in the diversity, creativity, thought process. Which roles will see the fastest growth is artificial intelligence specialist, AI specialist, medical transcriptionist, data scientist, customer success specialist, and full stack engineers. Fastest growth. And whatever I have picked up from a source which is available. Slides can be shared with the students so that they can really look into it. And I'm sure we are trying to help you see the future so that you are ready for that, and start thinking, asking questions to yourself that what are you practicing every day? What are you practicing every day which will make you a perfect future professional for the coming future uncertainty and facing that uncertainty. I wish you all the very best, students, and I'm sure once you have the experts coming in on the dais and sharing their views, you will have a lot of opportunities. Please make some notes. Reading, writing, and reciting is going to be there. And I think one of the best method of learning which I have believed and I have followed and I'm sure, which I have also picked up from Dr. Guru Prasad Murthy, that let us do that, because writing allows you to have multiple things which you may not be aware of, which senses work when you are writing. So do that, and we look forward for a very enriching learning conference. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for sharing with us a need for change. Now, I would like to invite Professor Krunal Punjani for launch of journal.
I request all the dignitaries to step on the dais.
just before the release of this journal now, in a few minutes back, we had a wonderful exposure of how technology can be levered to make something more interesting than usual and also suspenseful till the journal came out. This has been happening every year and on different occasions and different years in different formats. So we must appreciate the role of creativity and innovation and sustained efforts at that to make things unusual and totally different. That's why it said winners don't do different things, they do things differently. And please stand up, our colleague Krunal. Please give him a big hand. And it's an object lesson to all students here, how to apply their mind in different direction, given the same inputs, so that they come out with a totally different output, all other things being the same. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our first speaker of the day is Mr. Mark Nowacki. Due to some health issue, Mark sir cannot come for the event, but thankfully he accepted to connect with us on Skype. He shall be available soon.
Our next speaker is Dr. A.P. Jayaraman. Professor Dr. A.P. Jayaraman has completed his PhD, PGDMM. He is a chairman at National Center for Science Communicator, president at STREAM Academy. He served BARC as a nuclear scientist from 1964 to 2004. He was also a former dean, SICOMS. Now, I would like to invite Dr. A.B. Jayaraman on the dais.
Oh, no, then my hands will be tied.
Hello.
I am not audible enough. Thank you. Thank you for technologically. Thank you. So I'm beginning with a slide, but before I begin with a slide, let me look at the lamp. What happened at the lamp? We had a liquid, stearic acid. We have a solid, cellulose. But we had something very different. There were materials. It was ignited and a gaseous flame came out. It is the gaseous flame which education is. You have the textbooks, you have the professors, but you do not get educated unless it is ignited and it comes as a flame. The metaphor, the modern metaphor which scientists use for knowledge is the flame. You have the material, stearic acid and oleic acid, the oil over there. You have the wick, but which has got an absorption property and a capillary action. It brings it to the tip, then you light it. That lighting, that igniting, that is the most difficult reaction. It's not a chemical reaction, it's not a physical reaction, it is a reaction of a combination of the two. So how does a flame come? And it is the flame which is the capital, that's the human capital which we are trying to build. So I begin with my story, because I have read a lot of textbooks. I can quote a lot from the textbooks, but this is absolutely cold words, which mean nothing, to be full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, to quote Shakespeare. Now, if you look at this, I joined this department in 1964 when nuclear technology was in its infants. In its infancy, because we had the Cyrus reactor 1964. So I started from there. 1974, we exploded the first plutonium bomb based on this technology. And in 1998, we had a hydrogen bomb exploded from this place. This is the evolution of technology in its most concrete form in my lifetime. Beginning with the natural uranium, going into plutonium, which is produced as an artificial element, then going into hydrogen. 2 generations of technologies we leaped from here. There were 5,000 scientists working there. To live 40 years in this atmosphere and to work with them, to talk to them, to fight with them. And scientists are the most incorrigible people. If you put 2 of them together, each one will try to destroy the other. The business of a scientist is to prove that you are wrong. Scientists find grammar mistakes in love letters. That is their business. A love letter is something which is absolutely immaculate and impeccable. To find a grammar mistake in that, that is what science is about. The comma, the colon, the quotation, the capitals. They look for the minor things. But the beauty and perfection is in the minor things and not in the macro scale. If you do not know your microeconomics well, your macroeconomics has no meaning. If you do not know humidity, there is no value in your weather prediction. So I started from here. Now, that's why I wanted to mention this, that the science capital, which is now the in thing for the world, is built over a period of time. One of the hardest subjects to learn is physics. It doesn't obey everything all the time. And the problem with physics is whatever you study, you have to unlearn after 5 years. So learning and unlearning. You study about the certainty of the Newtonian physics. F is equal to ma, force is equal to mass into acceleration. Then you come to uncertainty principle. The position and velocity of the position and momentum of an electron cannot be determined accurately and definitely. So we study with certainty, we delve into uncertainty, and today uncertainty is the overarching principle over the world. But remember, the uncertainty in science is very different from the uncertainty in human affairs. Uncertainty can be measured. The delta P into delta X is equal to H cross. That is what the uncertainty equation says. The product of the uncertainty of one and the other, you know the value of the 2 uncertainties. So science, the art of measurement. And in management is very important. If you cannot measure something, you can never manage it. The heart of management is measurement. If you cannot measure, if you cannot quantify, it has no meaning. I can smile and you say I smiled. But you must know what is the difference between the depth between my lip tip here and the ear. And you should be able to measure it in millimeters. Then only you can say he smiled in a sufficient manner or not. So if you cannot measure, you just cannot manage anything else. So that is the fundamental aspect of it. So I begin with this career, which took me over a journey of 40 years, all the blunders and furies. And now you come to this Einsteinian space about future, the space-time continuum. I am just now worried with my family and this week. Can I get some good mutton for them on a Sunday? That's my present concern, nothing else. So that's where I am. I'm sorry. Just over here, family and week. Most of us are absorbed in what do we do for our family this week. Tomorrow is Sunday. How do I make my wife and daughter happy about it? But some of us who are above that will think a little ahead. Should I put my grandson in an IB school, an ICSE school, or a CBSE school, or IGCSE school? Some worry about education. Then of course we have also worried after some time, what shall I do with my grandson? So I am now trying to tell you the story of 2 generations of what I did with education with my first generation and with my second generation. That will be a true story, otherwise it will be a textbook case, which I don't do. So that is the human concern. Concern for man and his fate must be the chief endeavor of all scientific activity. Never forget this in the midst of your equations and graphs. That is what Albert Einstein said. I requote. Concern for man and his fate must be the chief endeavor of all activity. Never forget this in the midst of your equations and graphs. You can draw beautiful exponential graphs, but they will not follow the reality in the field. You can have targets fixed for you in marketing. You may not be able to achieve that. So the reality of the equations and the reality in the ground are entirely divorced. So that's what this equation shows. And then we are speaking about a future. The future is uncertain, we said, but the uncertainty is to be reduced to the irreducible minimum. That's what we are trying to do. Now you find there are known knowns. We know certain things, and if you put in these parameters, this is the outcome. That is the That is a domain where there is a circumference is described in absolute clarity. So we have the known knowns. Then we are a little more intelligent and smart. That is, there are known unknowns. I know this thing is not known. I know that neuromarketing equations have not been derived. Therefore, I cannot apply them. But I know that it is an unknown, but it is an unknown that will become a known after a passage of time. So I'm looking for that knowledge to get into and percolate into its primary state. Then there are the absolute unknown unknowns, totally unknowable. Did the universe start 13.5 billion years ago? We don't know. So we believe in fiction. We have facts, we have fiction, and we have a ratio of the two. What is your personal capital of this ratio of fact and fiction? That's where you stand. Your integrity in the world of knowledge depends on your ratio of facts and fiction. I have a large number of facts, a large number of fiction, and a large number of superstitions with me. And higher superstitions are now the most important thing in life. They are scientific, pseudo-scientific, meta-scientific. They will have all the garbage terminology and grammar of science, but absolute bunker. To differentiate this, it becomes a very big problem. So, principal was mentioning to the waves through which we went through. Yes, these are the 6 waves we had gone through. We started with iron, taking hematite and heating it and blowing it some air into that and trying to get iron. The elementary alchemy of that. From iron we jumped to steel. That was a big thing. A little impurity of carbon in iron gave strength to steel, and the strength was measured in terms of the iron-carbon ratio. So that is what we second wave. See, it is the small little things. It is the trivialities which make perfection, although perfection is not a triviality. This 0.1 less than percentage of carbon in iron converted iron into steel, and then a whole metallurgy Sheffield started. Then you find we started with steam power in the second wave. We went to electricity. We started playing with chemicals. So you see the transition of humanity is an accumulated cumulative knowledge base on which we have been building up. We got electricity. Then in the fourth wave is very important. That's where we came to petrochemicals, electronics, bit of aviation, and still higher. Ambition has no limit. Sky is not a limit. And we went into space. Right now in the fifth wave, which we are now going through, we got digital technology, biotechnology, software, information technology, all those technologies galore. Now we are on the sixth wave. We should know on which wave front we are in. If you do not know the wave in which we are traveling, the frequency of it, and the wavelength, we will never know on which wave we are traveling. So that is the critical aspect I want you to bear in. Now we also know that this says we should have, the program today mentions we should do research and development. Of course, the lifeblood of all knowledge is research and development. But research and development can be done in many ways. You can do research and development with a capital R and a capital D. Full-blown research, full-blown development. That is what real scientists do. Then pseudoscientists, they will do a lot of research. Their development will be very small. I know a scientist who spent 40 years in developing activated carbon and died. His business was purifying and making activated carbon for 40 years. Research was done. It didn't develop into 1 kilogram of carbon, and that is what R capital small d. If you do a research, and if you are not able to bring out a development product out of it, that research is absolutely useless. Then there are people who do a little research and do big development, standing on uncertain, slippery ground. If your research is weak, if you are on a feeble foundation, it is not possible for you to have a strong infrastructure. If your infrastructure is not strong, you can't build anything on it. So on a weak small r and a big D, what pharmaceutical companies do, that will not work. That is the third type of R&D which you should never do. Then we have the fourth type of R&D, small r, small d, only on paper. A little we do, the funds have been given, so I have to exhaust the funds, so I scratch. Scratching on the surface. Of course, scratching on the surface is an extremely pleasant feeling to have, But unless you go deep into that, you will never be able to do. So with these four categories of R&D and with the capital R and capital D, you must know the anatomy and physiology of R&D character. Now we come to RD2, research, development and demonstration. If I do some research and I do some development, I am not able to reproduce my results and show to somebody else. I am not able to demonstrate what I have done. I got my promotion, I got my PhD, but I am not able to show this reproducibly. I am a master of irreproducible results. And that is what happens R2. The real engineering skill required is research, development and demonstration. Show to others. Let the Chinese repeat it, let the Israeli people repeat it. If I don't have that confidence, but most scientists preciously close their secrets to their hand, I know it, I will not allow a pilot plant to be built on that. So knowledge, unless it becomes in the public domain and is easily available for critical examination, that knowledge is not a knowledge in the true sense of the word. So that is our RD3 component. Now look at this picture. It's very important. It appeared in the Nature magazine yesterday. This is the science capital which China is putting into them. It's very important. Your competitor is somewhere else, and a 14-year-old child in India is nothing compared to a 14-year-old child in China. That is the intellectual gap they have over us, and we must be very careful. As yesterday they put this iconic picture from China on their research capital, because now they are spending $500 billion last year they spent on research. And United States did it only 540. Close to United States. Now United States is no longer an uncontested leader in research and development. They are losing their place. And you will find, see the rate of growth of that curve. That's extremely important. And Nature decided to publish it in their front cover. This is where the world stands on R&D. So you can find we have a competitor whom we can never ever hope to catch up with. Let alone catching up with, even running along with them or running behind them will be increasingly difficult in the years to come. And because we are somewhere, we are a little above United Kingdom in terms of the total amount we spend. But it's not the total amount which is important, it is the per capita amount which we spend on research, and we stand at the bottom of the scale. So yesterday there was an Avishkar program of the Maharashtra State Universities. 23 universities presented the best of their products and services to us to examine. And Professor Hemant Sharma was there. We went around through the exhibits. You could get a glimpse of Indian products, innovation, deliverables which we have produced. There were about 550 products and services displayed by about 23 universities covering over 500 students. It was extremely important for me to go through each one of them, because I have seen a similar one 6 months ago at the Royal Society of London, where the UK universities have put in the best of their products. So it was a study in comparison between the UK display of universities and the Indian universities, the Maharashtra universities. What you find is shocking. Each display absolutely perfect, immaculate, impeccable for PhD thesis. But if you take it to the industry, you cannot expect that to come out for the next 50 years. You find excellent thesis on display. For example, to give you, there is a thesis on extracting phytochemicals from mango leaf. There is another thesis extracting phytochemicals from basil leaf. There are thousands of leaves in the world, and from each leaf you can produce a phytochemical, and each one will be absolutely perfect for a PhD, but will not produce anything to the market in the foreseeable future, in the next generation or beyond that. So running a wild goose chase behind phytochemicals, and the bright and beautiful minds are engaged in that in this country. The bright and most beautiful minds are engaged in an activity which is not going to be industrially productive for the next 5 to 20 years, although they are doing the best work. This is the tragedy, and I would even say the dichotomy in our philosophy. And there were about 2 or 3, but when 540 best products are shown and only 2 are coming out, our innovation index is abominably low. Technology. The change in technology we will never know. There was a time when only fountain pens were known. There was no ballpoint pen. In my younger days, a fountain pen is the only thing which will leak and make your dress absolutely dirty. That's what we had. The Pilot was the best. Today, I don't find anybody's shirt or dress being damaged by inking. But look at it. In 1929, the roaring one, 1954, only fountain pens. The disruptive technology of fountain pen was replaced by the ballpoint pen, and today, if there are 7 billion people in the world, each one has got a ballpoint pen. They don't have a fountain pen. So the transition from one technology to another, replacing the other one totally, that's what technology shows. So we come to the 4 pillars of a knowledge economy. We all say we are living in a knowledge economy, but what is a knowledge economy? What is our capital in a human capital, in science capital or material capital? Because Das Capital, ever since Marx wrote that book, we have been all infatuated with the capital. And the word capitalist has been condemned by all the political scientists because that is an aggregation of bottom line increasing. Of course, all industry is run by the bottom line. If the bottom line is bad, there is no industry. But the question is on social and political economy, we have to speak of a greater, grander challenge, and that is what is called the knowledge economy. We stand about 125th or so. The capital required for a knowledge economy is science and technology. And the science capital is a concept which King's College London has developed. Louis Archer was speaking about that. She has developed what is known as the science capital of a 12-year-old child. And if you compare the science capital of a 12-year-old child in UK or Singapore or India, you will find the vast world of difference. By science capital, she means all that you know or you don't know about science. It's a bag which you carry to the school. Apart from your books, you carry a virtual bag in which all that you know about science is put into that. And that bag is empty for most of us. So we carry an empty bag and walk into life. Of course, we spoke about sustainability. Now, the word sustainability is an overused, abused, and disused and misused word in all its sense. It is a qualitative term from the language of literature. In science, and in political economy, and in developmental science, it is a concept. Even today, it's a semi-quantitative concept. It originally belongs to Brundtland, the great lady, the German ambassador who developed this. Sustainability is using your resources today in such a way that your grandchildren will have the capacity to use it. If I have lanthanum and cerium which is available only for 20 years, and if I use it the way I like, my daughter and grandson will not have this for their tube light. Using resources at a rate faster than it can be replenished, and non-renewable strategic materials are today being consumed in such a way that they are not available for 2 generations ahead of us. So that rapacious assault on natural resources is what is to be stopped by sustainable development. We should also remember that sustainable development is a contradiction in terms. You cannot have infinite development with no use of materials. If materials remain, if iron ore remains as iron ore at the bowels of the earth, it's not converted into steel, you will never be able to develop. So there is a critical threshold at which development has to be done. But we have to develop technologies in such a way that the critical material requirement is not exceeded. That's what sustainability is asking us. So when we burn a lamp in the morning here, use of that oleum and stearic acid either as a fat for human input or for burning the lamp, we will have to weigh in grudging scales the merits and demerits of each and every action of us. If you do not weigh in grudging scales the merits and demerits of each and every action of ours, we will never be able to have stable development. Unthinkable. Look at the state of affairs, the state of the world. The planet is in peril. That's what all textbooks write. That's what newspapers write. That is what editors put as their headlines to attract the imagination of the people. But you will find that right now in 2020, we need 1.5 of this earth to run our present state of life. Can we have 1.5 earth, where we have only one earth, to meet our current standard of living, quality of life? And by 2050, we need 3 earths. The materials of 3 earths are required for sustaining the standard of living of today. Therefore, there is a rapid reduction of our requirements. By 2050, if you have to be satisfied with this planet alone, you need to drastically reduce your consumption. Each material we use will have to be tested for its sustainability index. So we have the global reporting index for every material today, and GRI evaluation is done by industries of what they are doing and what they are not doing. That's sustainability. So we have to go into change of mind. We have to unlearn all that we have learned in the time. So that needs, Professor has already given a detailed amount of the skills required. I'll skip it. Now I am unemployed and I am unemployable also. But you have to be employable in the market. You cannot remain unemployed, nor can you remain unemployable. How will you convert into employability? So see the standard definition given in the Higher Education Academy of the United Kingdom. They say a set of achievements, skills, understandings, and personal attributes that make graduates more likely to gain employment and be successful in their chosen occupation, which benefits themselves, their family, the workforce, the community, and the economy around you to remain employable in the world market. This is what employers were looking for. How do we achieve this? To achieve this, you need a minimum 5 mindsets. Most of us are trained like a horse, tunnel vision, extremely focused, highly concentrated. I will reach my destination no matter what happens. This strong, steely determination on our side is to be matched unfit for the world that is in the making. You may have all the knowledge of C.V. Raman, all about scattering of light and Raman effect, and still you will be absolutely useless in the market. Even if you know only 50% of which Raman knew, you will have a better chance in the world. Averageness is attractiveness, not brilliance per se. We need brilliant people. I'm not saying against, it's not an argument or advocacy against brilliancy, but it is enough, and most of us should understand averageness is attractiveness. We will be more acceptable to the employer if we are averagely important. But to come down from the pinnacle to an average level, we need a mindset which is very different. So we are now saying, that's what the International Baccalaureate syllabus is also asking for the IB students to pick it up at the age of 40, not at the age of 18. They have the Ramanic mind. They have a depth of knowledge in one domain. There they are masters and absolute captains of their destiny as far as that particular domain knowledge is concerned. But if I know all about gas chromatography, I know nothing about mass spectroscopy, I am absolutely nothing and useless. Therefore, you should know 2 regions at least and a definite area near your field. So that is what we call a synthetic mindset, a synthesizing mindset. That is, you have a depth of knowledge and you have a breadth of knowledge, and with this depth and breadth, you are able to create an area of the mind. So from a single line, you go into an area that is a 2-dimensional mind you have. With a 2-dimensional mind, by 2050, you are absolutely nothing. A 2-dimensional mindset is not enough and adequate. It will not be sufficient and necessary for this, and therefore we go to a creative mindset. Creativity has been, you have been explaining that it has gone to the top. So you need an Einsteinian mindset. Now creativity doesn't mean that the watermelon which is round is made into square. Any biotechnologist can make a round watermelon into a square one. It has logistic advantages because you can stack them one above the other. So it is an innovation. All innovations per se do not produce wealth. Production of wealth with the minimum amount of input, so that there is a direct, viable, feasible, demonstrable technological advantage on society is demonstrated. Whether the watermelon is round or square, it makes no difference as far as texture and sweetness is concerned. So that is not innovation. So Einstein did radically different thing. Fundamentally different. Energy and mass are not the same. They are the same. They are not different entities. E is equal to mc squared. It's easy to say truth is beauty, beauty is truth. That's a poetic way of saying. But Einstein said energy is matter, matter is energy. And he also said that the conversion factor is c squared. If he had not said that the conversion factor is c squared, Einstein would have been a poet and not a scientist. That is the difference between scientist and a poet. So, okay. The fourth mindset which is badly needed today is how to get along with your colleagues. Professor was saying that people's skills are not very important, but people's skills are important among technologists. Every electrical engineer thinks that the civil engineer is absolutely useless. And every civil engineering says that design engineer is no good. So this internal fight among the professions, that some professions are noble and I know more than you. That is why I said professionals are incompatible people. Put 10 principals together in a room. Each principal will think other principals, 9 principals as students. You get the most chaotic condition. The thermodynamic entropy of 10 principals in a room, each principal treating the other 9 principals as students. Because that's the mindset that they have grown with you. And they have succeeded. They have been successful principals. The moment you have a lifestyle and you have succeeded in that, it becomes a mission for you to execute in that same way. Why should I change when this system produced me like this? Am I to change a system which rewarded me? I have become the principal of this school by this process. So I will continue to do this no matter what others think about it. So that is the inflexibility. You are speaking about the flexibility of the mind. But inflexibility of mind is a disease. It's a syndrome which needs a rapid antibiotic treatment. So we need Kalam's mindset, which I call the Kalamic mindset. So we had the Ramanic mindset. We had the Mendelevian mindset of synthesizing. We had the creative mindset of Einstein. Now we have the respectful mindset. Concern and respect for others. A civil engineer is also as good as a mechanical engineer. That professional respect, and not to quarrel with other professions. To get things done, you have to be extremely respectful to contrarian views. When you are being attacked with facts and figures, you should not speak about the person who spoke. You should look at the facts and figures what's being presented to you. The ability to dissociate between an individual and an individual's assertion of facts, that decision we find it very difficult. What he said is right or not. You can call a person foolish, but you cannot call him a fool. That's what Shakespeare said. If I call somebody a fool, it's an eternal from birth to death, he is a fool. But if I say his action is foolish on a particular point, it is a space-time event. So you can call somebody a foolish act, but never call him or her a permanent fool. That's what Kalam has told us. He had a diploma in engineering. He has been dealing with the PhDs in engineering. No problem. That was the respectful mindset which today we need in multidisciplinary teams, and all your team members will be as qualified or more qualified than you in terms of the technical input. And there was, okay, we need another mindset, which I call the ethical mindset or the moral mindset. The moment I use the word moral mindset, ethical mindset, spiritual mindset, we are all cluttered with our what we have picked up in the past. But today in Harvard University, Professor Michael Sanders is teaching ethics in a very different way. Ethics is value neutral. Look at this situation. This is the famous trolley problem in management. You have a trolley. I think most of you have studied this in your MBA class, then I will skip this. Okay. So thank you, sir. Yes. This is a classical problem in ethics, which is being taught in Harvard University when they begin the first primer. You have a trolley. The trolley is moving. There is a pilot, a driver in the trolley. He comes to a Y junction. When it comes to a Y junction, he discovers to his utter dismay and confusion that the brake has failed. He cannot stop it. It's out of his control. But the steering is still under control. He can either turn to the left or he can turn it to the right. You have your principal and vice principal walking to the left, and you have 5 teachers walking to the right. If you turn it to the right, 5 teachers will vanish. If you turn it to the left, only the principal and vice principal will die. Choice is yours. What you do is important. What you don't do is equally important. Our actions and inactions become equally complicated. And if you do not like the principal, there is a subjective instinct within you to turn it to the left and go ahead with that. Your personal prejudices and predilections will come into play on a critical juncture like this. And life is full of situations where we will have to take poignant decisions like this. Will you turn to the left? Everything you do, everything you try to do, think, shall I turn to the left? Shall I turn to the right? What are the natural and probable consequences if I turn to the left? And what are the natural probable consequences if I turn to the right? Problem, according to Michael Sanders, doesn't stop there. Exactly at the point where the brake was lost, there is a footbridge. On top of the footbridge, you have your physical instructor standing. He is weighing 250 kilograms body weight, body mass. If you push him in front of the trolley will stop. You can save 2 to the left and 5 to the right. Shall we sacrifice 1 and save 7? That's an ethical dilemma which is springing up before him. Now, if that physical instructor happens to be your father, will you do that or will you not do that? Every action has to be examined in micro, nano details. And the natural and probable consequences of its action on you, reaction on you, has to be evaluated. This is the moral dilemma you will face. Will you buy a Chinese-made CFL or will you buy a Swedish-made CFL? You have to see the chain of events and then take a decision. That is increasingly complex world which is coming. This is also illustrated by him. Read Michael Sandel, you will get a lot of insight into the contemporary turbulent mind. So we need 5 mindsets. You have the Ramanic mindset, you have the Mendelevian mindset, you have the Einsteinian, you have the Kalamic mindset, and you have the Michael Sanders mindset. Put at least these minimum 5 mindsets are required for 2025. If you don't have that, you will be entering a world, you will be utterly rudderless. Now, we have been told that we are great problem solvers. BS, problem solvers. Human species is, if you try to find a definition for a problem in a management textbook, I think there will be at least 100 definitions available. What is a problem? But you will find one definition given by Trago, which says a problem is a significant difference between what is and what should be. A technical problem is a significant difference. It's not a difference I see. It's a difference shared by a large perspective of community. A significant difference of what is as on today and what should be. This gap is called a problem. And this is what we try to solve. For example, I have a CFL lamp here. This CFL contains 5 milligram of mercury. This 5 milligram of mercury is treated as an environmental contaminant or toxicant by a large number of people, not by me alone. So I have a problem. And that is what I call a technically fixable problem. So, but problems are hard problems in engineering and in science. We can solve them. We can solve a large number of problems provided you can define the problem. You can delineate the problem. So that is called solving the problem. But there are a large number of soft problems which cannot be solved. And soft problems have to be dissolved. So dissolving a soft problem is very different. The mindset, the analytical skills required for solving a soft problem is very, very different from what you do for a hard problem. Then there are fussy problems and messy problems which are not calling under either a hard fixable problems or soft problems. And the fourth category of problems are wicked problems. Whatever you do, all your solution technology of hard, soft, messy will fail when you deal with wicked problems. And life is full of wicked problems. If life were only full of hard problems, we are all very successful. Even soft problems we can do. Every day when you go to your office and sit, the first thing will be a wicked problem. How will you deal with wicked problems? That is the mindset you will have. And you don't have all the time in the world to do this problem-solving business. You should enter the competitive world at the age of 20s, early 20s. The earlier you join, the better. So what do? You have the horsepower. The current generation has the horsepower. But what we do is, we walk like a horse at the rate of 5 kilometers per hour. The way we go to school, 5 kilometers per hour. But if you're a trotting horse and if you can do it at 10 kilometers per hour, you will be outpacing rest of your colleagues. From a walking horse, try to become a trotting horse. But it's not enough. There are people who are doing cantering at 20 kilometers per hour. So you have a walking horse, you are a trotting horse, you are a cantering horse. But the best horse is a galloping horse, 50 kilometers per hour. 10 times your dimensional speed. So we should try to do that. Okay, now I will end with, sir, I have another 5 minutes? No, sir, another 5 minutes I'll wind up, starting a personal story. That's my good old self, who started professional career as a nuclear scientist at the age of 22 at the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, not knowing anything about the world. Next to me is my daughter. I knew that science was not a good subject to flourish in the years to come. And the wave there was the engineering wave. So I requested my daughter, please join engineering and join electrical engineering, go to VJTI, take a degree from there. So this is a transition from a scientific career to an engineering career. So after engineering in the manufacturing sector at Godrej, I told her, you are not in the manufacturing sector, you get into the IT sector. You get into MFG Pro, ERP systems, and do control on product movement, supply chain, logistics, and so on. So that's the one we did. Fairly successful as far as their generation is concerned, but what is important is that intergeneration. Today when I see my daughter, I am afraid to talk to her because she knows more than me. And if I phrase a question, she will find all the weaknesses, like the grammar mistakes in the love letter. She will tell me, Daddy, these are the errors. Don't go and speak to management students with your fossilized knowledge. And she prevented me this morning, be careful when you talk to them. Do not vitiate their minds. Be careful. Choose your words. Every word is a semantic vector. It is a volume and it's a direction and a magnitude. The moment you rotate a word in space, it creates a semantic space. And if you go on creating wrong semantic spaces in the minds of the younger generation, you are liable for prosecution. So I was warned when I started this one. So I always think twice. That's why I said I'm afraid of my daughter. But when I see my grandson, I follow a formula called TDS. Minimum time, maximum distance, with a shielding between him and me. This is a tedious formula. Time, distance, shielding. Keep minimum time for interaction. And keep good shield like this, lead, if possible. Now, I told him the educational system today is undergoing a sea change. Maybe CBSE will not be able to help you to get into an IB system. And I studied IB system along with him. I had a re-education. And I passed IB 4 years ago. International Baccalaureate, they scale you on 45. We got 43. Fairly good enough. Imperial College London for electrical engineering, which our mother did. And he completed a Bachelor of Engineering. Then came this curve. After his engineering, I asked him to apply for finance. Join PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. Asked him to appear for an interview. He did it. And he is, I am happy to say, is the youngest employee of PwC at the age of 20. And now he used to do management education after that. That's not the point. That is not the point. The point is coming here. This is what PricewaterhouseCoopers asked him. So I have collected the questions which PwC has asked, which global players have been asking. They never asked a single question on electrical engineering. He said, you have passed the examination, we know you know it or you don't know it, we don't care for it. We give you actual problems of life, how will you solve that? So they made a spider diagram. Remember, it's very important, KPMG, Deloitte, and PwC, all of them are using this spider diagram for entry of young MBAs into their system. This consists of BA, business acumen. I shall not go into the details of each parameter. I have volumes to speak about it. But remember, there is a package called business acumen. How good are you with your company's requirement? The company's requirement is given in the original yellow diagram. What you possess will be interviewed by 2 people. And each one will independently rate you on business acumen, and they will put a number for it. Then they will see your technical competence. As very, very fast, only a few generic questions about the development of electro-automobiles in 5 years from now, and the availability of lithium for a sustainable development based on an electric economy. See, the question is an involved one. It is not solved in any textbook on engineering. Availability of lithium 5 years from now and the lithium hydroxide battery which you will be using. That is the technical competence they ask. Then there is a global acumen. How do you work with your Chinese colleagues? If you are in an international team, there will be a large number of Chinese teams working with you. And how do you get along in that global milieu in which you work? That's the GA. Then comes the relationship management, which is coming back to your people's factor. Relationship management is very important. All of you would have studied Greikuna's formula of management. For every n into n minus 1 by n squared, the number of relationships you have to deal with in your practical life multiplies maddeningly by Greikuna's formula. And how do you manage such a huge number of cross-cultural, cross-functional dimensions of relationships? That is what is being looked for, relationship management. Then they look for a leadership, which is called whole leadership. You may be leader in one aspect. You should be able to change your leadership and be able to become a follower in the next minute. This dynamic equilibrium of leadership and followership. Leader in the morning, follower in the afternoon. Again leader in the morning. That is the dynamism required, and that is what is called whole leadership pattern. So that is the pattern which people, which companies, corporates like PwC asking for. What I have done is a journey. My journey, we started as a scientist, went into engineering profession, went into next generation. And I have to sustainably see that he has the right qualities for next 20, 40 years in the professional life. So what are the tools I have provided for him? And not that I have provided, telling him to keep these tools will be necessary for you. Machine learning and AI will be necessary. Better take an online course right now when you are in the college itself, parallel running. So parents and grandparents have a greater role today. They may be fossilized, they may be out of touch with the current syllabus, but they know how they lived and how they can guide. So that was the sharing of my experience. Of course, normally we shouldn't share personal experience, but if you don't speak from your heart of what you did and what you didn't do, what are your regrets, you are only speaking about the textbook. So I avoided speaking from the textbook. Thank you very much for your kind attention and patience.
Thank you, Professor Dr. A.P. Jayaraman. Now, I would request our director, Dr. Joshi sir, to come on the dais to give a token of appreciation to Dr. A.P. Jayaraman.